The WTA is in total meltdown mode right now because the one thing they tried to hide has finally exploded in their faces. The reality is that the professional tennis circuit is no longer a meritocracy where the best players win. It has become a playground for the rich and the connected, where entry into the world's biggest tournaments is literally for sale. We are watching the total downfall of the WTA leadership as their biggest secrets are leaked to the public. The documents prove that while you think you're watching a fair fight, the draw is often rigged before the first ball is even hit. This is the story of how a player bought her way into the spotlight and why the officials are absolutely furious that they got caught. The world was recently paralyzed by footage coming out of a professional tournament in Nairobi that looked more like a comedy sketch than a sport. A player named Hajar Abdelkader stepped onto the court, and the results were a total disaster for the integrity of the game. She didn't just lose the match, she won exactly 3 points the entire time. She served 20 double faults and looked like she had never held a racket in her life. The final score was a double bagel, 0-0, but the real score was the damage done to the sport's reputation. People were asking how a person with zero professional skills could end up in a draw with top-tier athletes. The reality is that this wasn't an accident or a simple mistake by a local tournament director. It was a symptom of a much larger and darker disease within the WTA and the ITF. Tennis Kenya tried to claim they gave her the spot because she was the only one who asked for it after someone else withdrew, but the documents prove that the vetting process was non-existent because the system is designed to favor connections over talent. While thousands of talented girls are grinding in the sun for a single ranking point, someone with the right phone calls can skip the line entirely. This viral nightmare in Nairobi was just the tip of the iceberg. It exposed the lie that the WTA has been telling us for years. But what happened next was even more shocking because it led straight to the doors of the Grand Slams. For a long time, fans have suspected that wildcards at major tournaments were being handed out as favors to massive management agencies like IMG. We see it every year at the biggest events, where a struggling former star or a marketable teen gets a spot over a player who actually earned it through the rankings. The reality is that these spots are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in prize money and sponsorship exposure. When a player buys their way in through these backroom deals, they aren't just taking a spot, they are stealing the livelihood of a hero who has spent their entire life trying to reach that stage. The documents from the International Tennis Integrity Agency prove that this isn't just a theory. The ITIA recently slapped a massive ban on David Marrero and Malik Jaziri for a scheme that involved literally paying for wildcards. This is the smoking gun that the tennis world has been waiting for. They weren't just requesting spots, they were offering cold hard cash to get into draws they had no business being in. Marrero was a top 5 doubles player in the world, and yet he was caught in this pay-to-play ring. If a veteran at that level is buying his way in, imagine what is happening in the women's game, where the pressure to be marketable is even higher. The WTA leadership under Steve Simon has allowed this culture to rot the sport from the inside out. They have created a system where the divas and the big-name agencies hold all the cards. If you are a player on the rise but you don't have a massive agency behind you, you are essentially invisible. The rulebook is supposed to protect the integrity of the draw, but Section 3 of the WTA manual has more loopholes than a block of Swiss cheese. The officials are furious because the public is finally connecting the dots between the Nairobi disaster and the suspicious wildcards we see at the US Open and Wimbledon. The reality is that the villains in the high-rise offices of the WTA have been treating the sport like a private club. They want us to believe that the same faces getting wildcards 13 times in a single season is just good for the game. But the hero of this story is the girl ranked 200 in the world who just got bumped out of the qualifying draw because a billionaire's favorite prospect prospect needed a growth opportunity. Those players are being robbed of their dreams, while the WTA CEO makes excuses for why the draw looks like an invitation-only gala. The frustration among the rank-and-file players has reached a breaking point. The internal fallout is already starting to tear the organization apart. We have confirmed reports that officials are now terrified of a massive legal challenge from players who feel they have been systematically excluded. The procedural failure in Nairobi was the match that lit the fire. When the Egyptian Tennis Federation came out and said they didn't even know who Abdelkader was, the whole house of cards collapsed. They tried to frame it as a development move for Africa, but it was actually a calculated lie to hide the fact that they are just filling spots based on who sends the fastest email or the biggest check. This scandal goes far beyond one bad match in Kenya. It goes to the very heart of how Grand Slams are organized. For years, the major tournaments have used their discretionary wildcards to boost star power because they're desperate for eyeballs. But the documents prove that this is undermining the very foundation of the sport. When you give a spot to a player who has won 3 matches in 3 years just because they're a legend or a face, you are telling every other athlete that their hard work doesn't matter. You are saying that the villain with the commercial deal is more important than the hero with the winning record. The industry is finally starting to distance themselves from this corrupt model. Sponsors are becoming nervous that their brands will be tied to these viral farce matches. The ITIA is breathing down the necks of tournament directors who have been playing fast and loose with the rules for decades. The reality is that the pay-to-play era is ending because it has become too expensive for the WTA to defend. Every time a bot player gets destroyed on national television, it proves that money can't buy talent. It only buys embarrassment. The WTA executives thought they could keep the lid on this forever. They thought the fans wouldn't notice that the same few players were getting backdoor entries into every big event, but the internet never forgets. The footage of that Nairobi match will haunt the tour for years because it is the ultimate proof of what happens when you let the system be for sale. The officials are furious not because the rules were broken, but because they can no longer hide the fact that the rules were never meant for everyone. They are lashing out and issuing sanctions now only because they are trying to save their own reputations. The players who have been fighting for a fair shot are finally being heard. They're tired of the meltdown excuses from the front office. They want a system where the draw is decided on the court, not in a boardroom over expensive dinners. The hero of this story isn't just one player. It is every athlete who has ever been told they weren't marketable enough to get a chance. They are the ones who are finally exposing the villains for what they really are, gatekeepers who have lost their way. The reality is that the WTA is facing its biggest crisis in history. The trust between the players and the leadership is completely gone. When you find out that spots in a Grand Slam can be influenced by commercial interests or literal cash payments, the magic of the sport dies. The fans aren't stupid. They see the diva opponents getting special treatment while the real contenders are left out in the cold. The officials are in a panic because they know that once the curtain is pulled back, you can't just close it again. The downfall of this corrupt system is not just coming, it is already here. We are seeing major changes in how wildcards are allocated because the pressure is becoming too much to handle. The pay-to-play ring is being dismantled piece by piece by the ITIA, but the damage is already done. Thousands of points and millions of dollars have been funneled to the Hmong people for years. The documents prove that this wasn't just a few bad apples, it was the whole tree. The hero in this narrative is finally standing up. We are seeing more players speak out against the undeserved entries and the lack of transparency. They are demanding to see the formal requests that led to these scandalous decisions. They are tired of being told that the star needs the spot more than the winner does. The industry is being forced to choose between the integrity of the game and the bank accounts of the executives. And for the first time in a long time, the executives are losing. What happened in Nairobi was a global embarrassment, but it was also a gift. It gave us the visual proof of what a bot spot looks like. It showed us the villain's plan in its purest, most ridiculous form. It stripped away the glamour of the tour and showed us the ugly truth underneath. The officials are furious because that video is a permanent stain on their product. They can't delete it, and they can't explain it away with a press release. The truth is that the WTA thought they could control the narrative by protecting their favorites. They thought they could silence the critics by calling them haters or misguided. But the reality is that the critics were right all along. The system was rigged, the draws were compromised, and the players who actually deserved to be there were being pushed aside for a quick buck. The meltdown we are seeing now is the sound of the old guard falling apart. As we look toward the next Grand Slam, the eyes of the world are going to be on that wildcard list. Every name on that list will be scrutinized like never before. The officials know they can't afford another Abdelkader moment on a bigger stage. They're trapped between their commercial promises and the demand for actual fairness. The villains are running out of places to hide. The era of the bot athlete is over. The hero is finally taking back the court.